Krueger goes cosplaying. Here's your second look at the Kotobukiya horror Bishoujo, Freddy vs. Jason, Freddy Krueger. Not only is this a second helping of the Nightmare Slasher, but this is also the second release of Freddy Krueger from the horror Bishoujo line. We've already had a look at the second edition Jason Voorhees, also from the folks over at Kotobukiya. Figure we should get some measurements going. It's the least I could do. Let's go ahead and get some measurements for the female Freddy Krueger, and taking the Ultra Measure-tron to the very top of her fedora. Stopping it right there. That seems like a good place. 8.4 inches in height, which and then in centimeters works out to be 21 and a half centimeters tall. Mind you, this review couldn't have been made possible without eBay seller Autograph Fan 69. I'll put the link down below to his eBay store if you want to check it out. But he was nice enough to contact me over on Facebook and said he had both the second edition horror Bishoujo Jason Voorhees, which we've already had a look at, and the second edition Freddy Krueger. Of course, I jumped the opportunity to grab those again, because silly me, I opted to sell a lot of these Bishoujo releases, thinking I just didn't need them anymore. Boy, oh boy, was that ever a big mistake. And I've since acquired all the ones I wanted to get except for one. Still got to get myself Chucky. So if anybody happens to have a horror Bishoujo Chucky laying around, let me know down below. In the meantime, though, let's have a look at Freddy Krueger, the second edition, and the second time we're having a look at this statue. And I have to admit, between this previous time that we had looked at the statue and now, I feel like during that span of time in between the gap, or in that gap of time, I've matured a bit, finding enjoyment from the statues that I maybe didn't find before. Thoroughly love the second edition Jason Voorhees, which admittingly I wasn't too keen on with the first go around. I feel like I almost feel the exact same way when it comes to Freddy Krueger as well. Departing the camera space just for one split second, want to also bring in the knockoff version of Freddy Krueger that we can also bring in so that you guys can see the difference between the two. At the time that I sold, not this one, but obviously the first time I owned these figures, these statues, I sold them with the intent that, again, I just didn't need the space. I didn't need to necessarily have all this extra stuff. And boy, oh boy, did I regret it after the fact. So I did go sourcing online, and to save myself some what I thought was necessary dollars, I did get myself the knockoff versions here located on the left. And we're going to do quick comparisons because obviously this review isn't going to be centric around doing just comparisons between a knockoff bootleg version of the Kotobukiya release and then the legitimate realsies, the OG, here on the right. But we'll do some comparisons because I'm all about comparing. When I did pick up these ones, and I did do a video of those if you guys want to check them out, I did know I was going into it picking up something that I knew wasn't going to be as good of a quality as the originals. getting them in hand, they're not terrible, I mean, by any stretch of the imagination. They're decent enough looking statues. They have a few little, of course, missings of things here and there, but overall, they weren't terrible looking statues. We'll do some comparisons quickly here of the real one versus the knockoff one here on the left. The one big noticeable difference between the two is the very stubby nature of the finger blades on the knockoff version versus the more traditional longer fingernails on the real release. There's quite the big difference, you must admit, between the two. It almost even seems like the hand is a different placement as well, but I don't feel like maybe it is actually, now that I'm looking at it. It seems like this hand here, this arm, is brought just a little bit further back than this one here that is brought a little bit further forward. I'm wondering, that simply can't just be a molding case where they've taken one mold and just copied it over to the other. I'm wondering why the arm is in different placement the way that it is. Maybe it's the fact that the waist is twisted. I'm not quite certain, but definitely seems like the arms, maybe not. Now that I'm looking at it, there's something definitely different between it. Maybe it's just the case. Maybe it's just the case that the fingers... Oh, I think it's just the case that the blades are going opposite directions. It's giving me like almost an optical illusion in which I think that the arm is a little bit further forward. But maybe they aren't further forward. It's just the fact that the blades are pointing different directions that's throwing me off. But it does seem like, doesn't it, that the bootleg version, the knockoff version, has the glove slightly closer to her face. Speaking of the faces, side by side, while the paint, like I said, wasn't terrible on this original release, you can kind of see the more you look at the two side by side, there's definitely a lot more depth to the original release versus this one right here. The skin is a lot paler. Hair is a little bit muddier also as well. We'll talk about that also in a second as well. The eyes aren't that much different, although there's much more coloring on the Kotobukiya release. The lips shine a little bit more, and I now see it as well that they just left the coloring of the teeth completely off. In fact, actually, it kind of looks like she's got a hollow mouth. Her teeth are in there, but they're way, way back in there. Whereas here, like if you look at it, her teeth are pushed all the way to the back, whereas this one right here has the teeth further forward, the way that they should be. The sweaters are about the same. This one has a little bit more sheen to it. A little bit more separation, I think, of colors. This one doesn't really have as much the divide. It just seems like they kind of blend a little bit more into one another. Is it terrible necessarily? No, I wouldn't say it's... Like, if you were... Honestly speaking, if you were strapped for cash and you didn't have a lot of money and you just wanted to get releases of these statues, I'm all for picking up knockoffs if you know exactly that it's a knockoff. If you're paying a little bit more, obviously, for something like this, and you end up getting this because somebody's misrepresenting what they're selling, then that's a different case altogether. But if you are going into it thinking, I know I'm going to be getting myself a knockoff, it probably doesn't have as much the paint to it. Like even like the legs, you'll see. It seems like the blood is just a little bit thicker. The lines are a little bit thicker on this one than on this one here. And if that's enough for you, that's fine. Like even the meshing on the leg, a little bit bigger on this, on the original release versus the knockoff release. Well, again, I'm not going to spend the entire review doing side-by-side comparisons. I hope, if anything, reviews like this will be helpful to you if you are looking to pick these ones up for yourself. Maybe you picked up this one for yourself and thought something seemed off about it. Hopefully it's videos like this that'll show you. Obviously, the big one is the finger blades. The finger blades should be the dead giveaway that you have picked up. Unfortunately, maybe against your knowledge, you may have picked up the knockoff version. So again, there's the side-by-side comparison. We're not going to do a whole ton of comparisons for the rest of this video because I want to spend a lot of time on this one here. Just in closing thoughts, this one also did have the plastic stand, which was not removable. This one here has the magnetized stand, which I'm kind of really missing the days when Kotobukiya releases had magnetic stands. You do forfeit a whole lot of extra details that some of the new releases did have, like the Michael Myers, for example, or even like the Ash Williams. Had really cool looking bottom display bases to it. These are just simply pools, in this case, of blood, and then it's just magnetized. It attaches to the bottom of her feet. And then on the underside, you've got the felt pad underneath just to prevent any scratching, and you've got, you know, legitimate New Line products, ink and trademarks and all that stuff, whereas this one would not have it. Another dead giveaway that this one here is definitely not the original, but instead a knockoff that you may or may not have been aware of that you unfortunately picked up. Now, I certainly didn't want to spend the entire review of doing side-by-side comparisons, but I did think it was important to discuss, of course, getting the original releases and getting something that you know is a knockoff. And providing you know it's a knockoff, if you don't have the available funds, I'm all for supporting the idea of getting yourself a knockoff. Again, if you know it is. And that's all the more reasoning why I did want to spend some time talking about that in this review, showing you guys side-by-side comparisons. Freddy does benefit from the fact that at least she is a little bit more easier to be distributed by companies that are selling her. Case in point, actually, at the time that you're watching this video right now, and it's certainly no plug to places like Big Bad Toy Store, but Big Bad Toy Store right now stocks this one and is right now shipping these ones out. Unlike the Jason Voorhees, which unfortunately is tied up to, you know, court legalities and big court fights right now over the ownership of rights to that film franchise, Jason's going to be a lot harder to come by, so I was anxious when the Autograph fan 69 contacted me and said, look, I have an extra Jason. I'm more than happy to sell it to you. And like I said, I jumped at the chance. This one would have been a little easier to come by, but the price points still on these are about an $80 to $100 price point. So honestly speaking, if you didn't have the funds, but you did want to add these to your collection, you know, full disclosure, those knockoffs cost me about $35, about a third the price of what the real release is going to have. So again, you got to do a little bit of balancing. You know, sometimes you do have to make sacrifices to have certain pieces in your collection. And honestly speaking, I've been in similar circumstances as well. If I didn't get a chance to pick up these ones, I would have settled for the knockoffs, and the knockoffs were fine for what they were. And I also saved a whole lot of money versus trying to pick up these after the fact. All right, so let's have a look at the statue. Spending, like I said, some much needed, I know probably a little smaller amount of time I could have spent on it, but I did want to show you guys the difference between the two, because it's always something that I find is an interesting talking point. Spending less money on the same type of statue, but then you forfeit a little bit of the quality. You know, I always feel like it's important to talk about these things. And I always like reading your comments down below what you guys think of buying knockoff pieces. If you know they're knockoff, buying them versus the original releases. So let me know what you guys think down below. So let's talk a little bit about the statue base. It does look familiar, doesn't it? It looks familiar because the Jason Voorhees also happen to have this same blobbed display bottom. Mind you, it was green, and you could probably chalk it up to being swamp water. Here, I would never mistake this for swamp water, nor would I mistake it for strawberry jelly. This is clearly a big pool of blood, which I think works, I guess, well for Freddy Krueger. I don't really think usually big blobs of blood, big pools of blood surfacing and settling underneath his feet, but that's ultimately what they went with. Magnetized display stands are something I do appreciate with the Kotobukiya releases. It does make moving the feet around a lot easier, and it doesn't necessarily assign you to one place on the stand. If you wanted to have the feet, for example, over here, you can do that. Or if you want to have the feet on an angle, you can do that as well. One thing I will say, though, while there is the benefit to using magnet bases, the camera doesn't seem to like focusing on that at all, it does lose a little bit something for appeal. The appeal of the stand simply just being a magnetized metal plate, obviously there's not as much interest, and it's not as cool, say, as compared to the Ash Williams or compared to the Michael Myers that we had a look at as well. Those are figures, those are statues that are permanently attached to those bases, but the trade-off is at least you get a little bit more of a decorative base. These are just, like I said, just a metal plate, and then underneath that, underneath the boots of Freddy Krueger, you have two magnetized rectangular magnets, and again, it just attaches to the base like that. One thing I will say, though, is the way that you attach, and I probably have said attached a whole lot of times, but the way that you affix the statue to the base will also help determine how much stability you have for the statue. As I said, you could really have the statue any which way you want, but just know If you have it slightly off-kiltered from the shape of the base, that may affect the way it stands. You may not get as strong of a footprint when you're having on the shelf. So I would most definitely say put the feet like closer to the centers and have the kind of blobs around it, so it just kind of holds it as best as it can. Let's have a look at the figure's face, the statue's face, and I think for that I'll probably just take the base off so it's a lot easier for me to hold. Some time has been spent. The time between the first time I had a look at this statue and the time now, there's been a considerable enough space in between, and I think I have matured my tastes a little bit for these. Jason Voorhees, I wasn't as keen on it the first time around, but I tell you this, the second go around on looking at that statue, I adore it. I feel the same way on Freddy here, but I think I actually liked Freddy a lot more initially that first go around. So it's a lot less of a climb for me to go from slightly liking the statue to really liking the statue. This, I would definitely say, the face portrait is awesome. I love how beautiful Freddy Krueger's face is. As certainly a female, and female goes, it's a nice representation of Freddy Krueger. Now these would have been based on cosplayers dressing around as Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees respectively. They kind of have taken cues from that for designing these statues. And I have to admit, it actually works quite well. I will say it's not everyone's cup of tea. Reading the comments that I did for the Jason Voorhees statue review, it was really polarizing. There was a split divide in the middle. Some people thought it was completely unnecessary to depict these characters as female statues, while other people really liked the idea. I think I'm more moving towards the idea of really liking the idea than I did when I first started having a look at these. When I first looked at these, I didn't get the whole appeal of turning Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger into female characters. Since then, I have to admit, I have warmed up to it considerably. Again, like the face portrait is just adorable. I love how beautiful the portrait is on it. It's obviously not scarred. You're not going to see any burns on her necessarily, but you will see a whole lot of cuts. They try to keep it as beautiful and feminine as they possibly can. You can see that there's that reflection on her green eyeballs there, or the green irises on her eyeballs. And she's got a little bit of light almost reflecting off of the pink. It almost looks like lipstick there that's been applied to her lips. Just again, a beautiful looking head portrait. One thing I wasn't thinking I liked so much the first time either was the fact that her hair was a translucent plastic. If you were to run a light behind it, which I don't have at the moment, you would see the light is sticking through it. The hair is not even quite yellow. It's almost kind of a greenish yellow. So it's jarring first, but again, it's warmed up. I've warmed up to the idea. I think even when the first time I had a look at this in the first review, I even commented, I don't know why they just didn't make her hair orange. But going back to it again, I know it's kind of based on the cosplayers. So could an orange hairstyled Freddy Krueger as a female certainly could make a lot more sense. I get now why they went with blonde. Her Freddy trademark sweater, what is left of it certainly, is quite considerably ripped. You still have the alternating colors of the red and the green. They've added a fair bit of shading also to it in the arms and the kind of insert areas right underneath her arms. There's a little bit darker of color there as well. Obviously, for the perverts, there's the visible top of her bra there and the bra straps running up the side, which is also something that the knockoff couldn't accomplish. Finishing off and having the straps actually connect to the sweater, it was completely left off. Oh, you can't even see it. They put little small details like little rips, little tattered areas to the top of the sweater. Really liking that. You got the blood slashes on the side, and you got a few gashes also on the leg down below. One thing I really liked about this statue the first go-around also was that it had on the back of her jeans, instead of the company patch, instead it says Freddy versus Jason. And again, a small pair of jean shorts here represented on Freddy. You got some slashes on the side. I'm not sure if that would have been caused by her own claw marks or if that would have actually been done from Jason, but you see a few rips in there. Some nice seam lines been done to the pockets as well as the back pockets there, and even like around the area in which the belt would feed through the loops has been done some stitching there as well. The only thing that isn't of the material plastic is this mesh fishnet stocking, which is actually made up of a real fabric. Here up at the top though, it's not real fabric, it's plastic, but everything down from that, connecting down to the boots, is done with an actual mesh. And that's something else I really quite like. Some silver have been added to the boots on both sides. And while the alternating mesh to non-mesh, it might have even been something of a negative point I may have mentioned at the beginning or during the time of that first go-around on this statue. I think I actually have warmed up to the idea that she does have mesh on the one side and just a full black legging on the other side. As you can see, she's got her hand draped, resting against the side of her hip, kind of at the side of her abdomen. Seems like the jeans are awfully tight. It just seems like there's a fair bit of, not a fair bit, but you got a little bit of flesh that's kind of slightly hanging off, making me think that those jeans, I don't know how you're probably going to get them on and off. They're just probably been painted on her, literally. As for the claw, the Freddy's claw is done with the black plating, which is not something you tend to see too often with Freddy. This would be done in like a bronze or a copper plating. Here instead it's done in all black. A nice offsetting color to the brown on her glove. You can see even like the fingers and the palm of her hand sticking out from the opened sections of her glove. Blades are, as you could probably guess, extremely fragile. I'm sure I don't even have to tell you how fragile those would be. So be a little bit careful when you are taking this out of the packaging, because there was actually a film of plastic that was just tucked underneath the blades. If you quickly pulled that, most definitely you would have broken off some of those blades. So you just want to be very, very careful of this. Like I said, though, when it comes to displaying her, she wouldn't stand on her own, unlike Jason. So most definitely you would have to be using a display stand. Do I wish that they could give us a third release of Freddy Krueger? Absolutely. Because I think you could also, in that span of time, I think they could come up with a much more elaborate looking display bottom. Maybe like the actual floor grading of the actual, like the boiler room. You could probably do something neat with that. You wouldn't be able to probably take the statue off of the base, but you would definitely have a much more creative looking base than the straight out metallic plates that they went with both Freddy and Jason. Freddy and Jason are the only, as far as I know, the horror Bishoujos. Well, actually that is true. They're the only horror Bishoujos that have had magnetized bases. I think Chucky actually was one of the first that had the attached pegs. These ones does benefit from the fact that you can, again, remove the stands, the figures, the statues off of the stands if you wanted to. But again, I really don't know why you'd want to, because in a case like Freddy Krueger, she simply can't stand without that display stand. Here in Final Looks, I decided to display the side of the box. Not something I normally do, but it gives me an opportunity to show you the stellar artwork located on the side of the box, sort of the inspiration for what we get in the statue here on the right. I can see that they have made some changes when you look at the two side by side. It seems like Freddy Krueger in the drawing has brown boots. Instead, what we ended up getting was the black boots. I think brown actually could work. Also, one of the big changes too is that the vibrant red stitching on the jean shorts has completely been gone, and instead they just went with the same coloring for the rest of the jean shorts. I think that is a good idea. I don't think bright red would have worked very well. It certainly does open the doorways to potentially third versions of these statues. Listen to me talk. I spent so much time trying to get another version of the Freddy and the Jason because I so foolishly sold them the first go around, and here I am already talking about another version. If Kotobukiya, though, does want to make use of the exact same molds, companies always like to do, and get the most out of their molds that they possibly can, what I would love to see them do for maybe a third version is give us one that actually has the boiler room flooring. It could be plastic. It doesn't have to be something that the figure or statue has to be removed from. Permanently affix it to that display base. We've gotten that with lots of other of the Kotobukiya statue, horror Bishoujo statue reviews that we've done here on this channel. All of those statues utilized a really decorative looking display base. I would love to see them also do the exact same thing with Freddy Krueger. Again, maybe do a boiler room flooring. That would be really neat. And maybe some of the things, the changes that we see on the side of the artwork could potentially come over for a third version. Giving her like the brown boots, for example, and maybe even instead of doing red and green stripes, maybe start doing, maybe for another release, give us black and red stripes. It's enough of a change that if you picked up the second version like I finally was able to do, you could have a little bit of a difference of change, a different design from the second version to the third version. It would still warrant you wanting to get both releases. Either way, though, a big thank you to Autograph Fan 69 who contacted me over on Facebook. I'll put the link down below to his store, where I actually ended up picking up both the Jason and the Freddy Krueger. He was so generous enough, like I said, to contact me on Facebook and tell me, look, I noticed you mentioned in the review that you passed on, you sold your Jason and your Freddy. I have extras. Would you be interested in buying it? I don't think my typing could have been fast enough for my immediate response of, yes, I'll definitely buy those off of you. So a big thank you to Autograph Fan 69. A couple of questions I can certainly pose you, the viewing mob, is, have you ever sold something that you regret maybe immediately after? I don't think I regretted selling these the first day or so, but it would probably take about a week or so. It might have even been a week and a half, where I was already having seller's remorse, thinking to myself, why would I have parted ways with statues of female Jason and female Freddy? I also might add, I sold Tiffany and Chucky, and while I've been able to replenish all the collection up to this point, the one that I still want to get is the Kotobukiya Horror Bishoujo Chucky. Did have it the first go around, sold it. Such an idiot. Don't do that. But let me know down below, guys, have you ever sold something that you outright regret afterwards? It doesn't have to be like right after you sold it. Maybe it was a month later. Maybe it was half a year later. Maybe it was a year later. Let me know if there's anything that you sold and what it was that you regretted selling after the fact. If you also managed to have the Horror Bishoujo statue of Freddy vs. Jason Freddy Krueger in your collection, let me know what you guys think of let me know in the comments down below what you think of the statue. And do you think, here's a whole bunch of questions posing in final looks. One better also, would you buy the knockoff based on the comparison of the knockoff versus the original? Keep it in mind as well, it's more than half the price off. It's about a third the price of the actual official release. And as you can see, there really wasn't a whole lot different between the two. Would you be more than happy just to spend a lot less and get yourself the knockoff version versus the original? So a couple of questions I could throw out to you guys. If you are new to this channel or long-time viewer and just maybe never got around to it, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, swing on over to your neighbor on Elm Street, and turn on that bell notification so when future videos are coming onto this channel, you'll never miss out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time.